Imagine this, an old-fashioned drink given a new lease of life.
People would come in and be like, can I get a peach and honey iced tea, or can I get a raspberry lemonade? And I had never experienced that in hospitality before.
How one Wellingtonian put soda back on the menu.
A friend of mine before we started was like, don't do soft drinks. He was like, you're never going to beat Coke.
Yes, this is another episode of Imagine This, the podcast where we talk to awesome creative minds right here in Wellington, and they tell us their secrets, their backstories, the lessons they've learnt along the way. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome today's guest, the co-founder of 6 Barrel Soda, a great Wellington brand. His name is Joe Slater. Hey, Joe.
Hi, Jehan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for being here. You have a pretty special brand in Wellington, and I remember about 10 years ago, your soda shop emerging in the middle of the city and this sort of novel experience of going to a soda shop and paying for a glass of soda. It seemed like a bit of an experiment back then.
Yeah, I think it absolutely was. I mean, I've always been pretty into the idea of doing things that are a bit weird and people, making an experience that people kind of come to and go, what is this place? What are we doing here? I think that is part of what makes venues interesting and cities interesting, right? So the soda shop to me made a lot of sense because I'd been to kind of places a little bit like it, and there was a heritage of those sorts of places, especially in the States, but even in Wellington there used to be, milk bars and things like that in the old days. So I was excited about the idea of bringing back something that was a little bit more unique.
It does have that nostalgic feel, doesn't it, soda?
Yeah, totally. And I think when we first started, we probably leaned into that quite a lot. We still were trying to take some of those elements of nostalgia, but bring it into a kind of modern brand, and we've definitely worked more towards that. But yeah, certainly in the States, it was definitely a nostalgia thing for a lot of people. It was the soda jerks, slinging drinks, from Prohibition onwards. Really, it was a place that people would go and kind of hang out when you couldn't go to bars and get trashed. Was
that the backstory?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, a lot of the soda brands in the States started as offshoots of pharmacies a lot. They were ways to get a bit of a kick when you couldn't just go to a bar and get sloshed. So,
wow.
So, the origins of Coca-Cola and Pepsi and all of those things were, they were uppers essentially, and people would go and drink quite a lot of them at those places to get a bit of a buzz on. So we weren't doing the buzz part, but we were doing the hanging out and the trying different things part.
So before starting this business, you were working in hospitality.
Yeah, I'd worked in hospitality since uni, in bars and cafes and restaurants, largely overseas. I went to Australia pretty soon after uni and was there for about 4 years, and then had a year in the UK and France. And then coming back to New Zealand, we opened, me and Mike, my co-founder of 6 Barrel, opened a little cafe, a little coffee shop at the top of Cuba Street. And then after that, we opened a little restaurant in Newtown.
Monterey.
Yeah.
Awesome spot.
Yeah.
So hospo's a pretty tough industry to work in, isn't it?
It's super tough, yeah. I mean, it's tough to work in, and it's tough to run a business, and it's tough to own a business. I think the margins are tight, the hours are horrendous, and it's just a bit of a slog. I mean, some people make it work, but a lot of people it's just a long, hard time. But it has its benefits as well. It's really social. You get to, eat and drink some great things, and, you meet a lot of interesting people.
Where did the idea for 6 Barrel come from?
Partly it was out of Monterey. So we were making, when we opened Monterey, a big part of what I wanted to do was to showcase some interesting things that weren't just the same, same beers, same wines, same soft drinks that every other bar in town had. So it was right about the time that craft beer was booming. So actually it was a bit before that. So we were one of the first places to have all independent taps in Wellington. I think there were a couple of others at the time, beer taps. So, and there started being more brands like Parrot Dog came out, and Garage Project came out, and Epic Beer were in Auckland, and there were a few of those early craft beer brands that we could stock. But there was nothing in the soft drink space. Phoenix had just sold, and there was, it was before Karma, and it was before kombucha. You know, there was nothing really in that space that was interesting, unique, independent, and top quality. So for me, I was, you know, with my cocktail bar background, I could create flavors and make the syrups to make these drinks that I could whip up in house that were, you know, super tasty and a bit out of the ordinary. And then from there, I guess it got a bit of a following. Like we'd find that people would come in and be like, you know, can I get a peach and honey iced tea, or can I get a raspberry lemonade? And I had never experienced that in hospitality before. It was always an afterthought. It was always, you know, oh God, I've got to drive home. Can I get a Coke or whatever? So that made me go, hey, look, people are really interested in having good quality, non-alcoholic options. How can we kind of turn that into its own thing?
Why do you think people who want to drink non-alcoholic drinks have been so poorly served for so long? Because now we have this explosion, there's this huge emerging market, and partly driven by the fact that more people are choosing to give up alcohol and are breaking through that social stigma around not drinking. But, you know, we're not talking ancient history here. We're talking 10 years ago. I mean, why was it that it was always an orange juice or a Coke that you had access to if you didn't want to drink?
I think it was a couple of things. I think it was the stigma around not drinking. So, you know, growing up, everyone, you know, my early 20s, everyone I knew drank alcohol, right? Like it was, I don't think I knew one person who didn't. And if you didn't when you're a bit older, it was probably because you're an alcoholic, right? And you were sober, which, you know, is still the case for a lot of people. But I think it was a stigma thing. I think, you know, about getting teased or getting, you know, feeling a bit ridiculous to drink a non-alcoholic drink. So there's definitely been a more acceptance of, hey, you know, we don't all need to get trashed all the time. And I also think the other problem was hospitality operators traditionally drink a lot. And so, you know, it was always an afterthought.
And was it also the sense that maybe people wouldn't pay enough money for a non-alcoholic drink?
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you're a bar and you've got someone coming in and buying one or two $5 soft drinks, that's pretty tough to pay your bills. If you've got someone coming in and drinking $8, $12 beers, you're going to kind of look after them a bit better. So, and that's a real shame. So I think there has been a more of a movement towards offering higher quality non-alcoholic drinks that people might drink 2 or 3 of if they're on a huge night out, you know?
So you had customers who were interested in these soda products. What made you think that you could commercialize this and turn this into a business? Tell me about your thought process around that as you were weighing it up.
We didn't do a huge, big strategic, you know, 5 or 10 year plan. Right. It was very much we knew that we could operate a cafe, a hospitality space. So when we opened our space on Eva Street, that was a big part of the focus was, hey, we can make that part work and hopefully that pays the bills for the rest and we'll see what happens with that. In a lot of ways, that was how we did it. We were like, we know the products are good. We think people will buy them, but we didn't have a, you know, plan to be in supermarkets and rolling out international markets and, you know, have hundreds of stockists around the country. That really came as we moved through things.
So when you look back on that, how important was it that you had this shop front window in town where people could come and see the products, get acquainted with them, taste them? That's how the buzz started to spread around your products, right?
Totally, yeah. I think it was essential. I think we wouldn't have been here. We wouldn't be where we are now without it.
So what did you learn from that?
Well, the big part of what we were trying to do with the shop was destigmatize soda in a way. We wanted it to be a place where people could, you know, see and smell the drinks, see that we weren't just putting crazy chemicals into it, and experience the different flavors and go, you know, because it is a pretty intimidating thing to go, hey, you want to buy this, you know, dandelion and orange soda. So it was a way that you could kind of try a few things out. And just having that access to customers early was really great for feedback. For, you know, we tried out all sorts of weird flavors that people were like, nope, that's not for me.
Like what?
We did a pine, like a Christmas tree soda, which was actually super delicious, using some wilding pines from the South Island.
Right, so like drinking a Christmas tree.
It was really like drinking a Christmas tree. Yeah. I did. I made another tree one, a eucalyptus one at one point, but then I quickly realized that eucalyptus is a little bit poisonous, so we never sold that one. But
right.
It was really tasty.
What was the response from customers?
It was great. I mean, it was a really visual place. So and our brand's always been really visual. So it was a place where people, it was just when Instagram was kicking off, and we were the most Instagrammable cafe in Wellington was our thing, but we weren't even on Instagram for the first while. We didn't really think that was going to happen. But yeah, the feedback was awesome. The people loved the products. We weren't selling tons of syrup at the time, but it was a really good way for people to kind of come through and see that we were a real business.
So when did you realise, okay, I want to go beyond this soda shop. I want to commercialise this further?
Yeah, I think we had a couple of customers get in touch. We weren't doing any sales at the time, so we had a few friends who ran cafes that were stocking us, which was great. I had a friend who was a buyer at Common Sense Organics who stocked us, which was awesome. And then when, we got our first big More Wilson's order, they came to us and said, hey, we want to buy some product. And that really gelled with us. And we were like, well, this is more than just selling 1 or 2 bottles here and there.
That's a real jumping off point, isn't it, for a business? So you're standing on this precipice. You've had moderate success up to that point, similar to a lot of startup businesses. Now you're at the point of trying to decide, are we actually going to throw ourselves into this? That may require capital, it may require investment, it may require more skills. What was that process like? Was that daunting at all?
Not super daunting. I mean, we didn't have any capital. I think partly I didn't have a fallback. I think a lot of people who start businesses like this have a 6-figure career that they can go back to relatively easily if it doesn't work out. For me, I didn't have that. So I didn't have, family money or any of that stuff to fall back on. So it was very much, let's make this work. Let's, keep refining what we're doing, and let's work it out as we go. And also, I think it was a learning experience, right? Like it wasn't the time where we could go, let's get a couple of $1 million and scale this thing like crazy over the next year. It was very much let's build it slowly. Let's use the revenue that we've got coming in to help pay for everything and pour everything back into it.
Did you know what you were looking for in terms of business success, in inverted commas? How did you view your future?
I don't think we did, no.
So you didn't quite know what you were actually shooting for?
I was shooting for a consistent salary that was better than I could get outside of it. And I was shooting for, I guess, having a product that we were really proud of. That's always been super important. I think when you're running a business like ours, it is super personal. It is, it's a creative outlet. It's an expression of, what we wanted to do. So if you're just putting out junk, then I think that would have been really hard. So for me, having a product that 10 years in I'm super proud of is success.
What was the advice you got from other people? I mean, did people in the business space seem to believe in what you were doing, or was there some skepticism?
It was a bit of both. I think everyone loved the brand. They loved what we were doing, and they loved the products. There's definitely skepticism about how you can do what we were doing in a soft drink space dominated by 2 massive companies, right? So, I remember a friend of mine before we started was like, don't do soft drinks. He was like, you're never going to beat Coke. And I think it's that attitude of, it's the startup attitude where you've got to take everyone out and take over the market where, Coke is enormous. If you get 1% of Coca-Cola, you're a big business. So it's not about taking brands down, I don't think. I think it's about creating a niche, carving out a space for yourself, and maybe reaching an audience that doesn't have products that suit what they want at the time.
Was that part of your motivation at all? Did you look at a bottle of Coke and think, man, it would be great to get 0.1% of their market share in this country?
Totally, yeah. I mean, when I was an angsty teenager, one of my goals was take down Coca-Cola, this evil corporation. And
why?
So I always had an inherent distrust for big multinational companies who were slinging products that I didn't think were very good for the world or consumers.
Right.
I mean, I ate at McDonald's at the time, so it was definitely a hypocritical
So you weren't
viewpoint.
a total anti-capitalist.
No. But I think, I like the idea of, small business is something I really love. Like little businesses doing interesting things is really important for communities. And those big brands cancel that out a lot of the time. There used to be dozens of soda companies in New Zealand.
It sounds like what you're saying is basically run your own race, be aware of your competitors,
Yes.
but don't build your entire business model around trying to replicate what someone else is doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think as soon as you start to do that, you can't win, because you can't do Coke better than Coke's doing Coke, And for me, I think early on we probably made that mistake a little bit. We were probably like, this is what this sort of a brand should look like and how we should, talk. And I think as soon as we realized that, hey, we can be anything we want, and we started doing it a bit more personally, is when we started going, this is more interesting, and people really respected that authenticity.
You're obviously a Wellington company. You're still in Wellington. What do you like about doing business here?
The community is amazing, right? It's such a supportive community from all the artisan products that have come out of Wellington over the last decade. A lot of them exist because of the community have bought them and have supported them, and places like More Wilsons and Common Sense Organics have supported them. So yeah, I mean, people are really keen to try weird stuff here, which is great, and they're really patriotic about the brands that come out of here, and will support them over, cheaper, nastier brands. I mean, it's also just a lovely city to live in, right? Like it's compact, you can get around. It's a bit expensive, but it's got everything. It's a nice little compact town with lots of art, lots of culture.
You had a brief foray into Auckland. How did that go?
Yeah, I guess we were always trying to do a store in Auckland. I think after seeing the success of our Wellington site, it was such a great way to introduce people to who we are and what we do, that it had been on the cards for years. We'd been planning, we'd been looking for sites. We finally found a site. The fit out took a bit longer than we thought, and we opened on Karangahape Road 3 days before the 2020 lockdown.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it couldn't have been worse timing, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think we had to immediately close.
And that was the end of that?
No, we kept going. So we were fortunate that it was quite a small space, and we shared it with another business. So we only had one employee, and she worked for 3 days, and then she had a couple of months off. But when the lockdown finished, we reopened, and we gave it everything. But it was pretty tough. There was just, especially in Karangahape Road at the time, there was a massive amount of roadworks. People were still really scared of going into the city. It just never quite got where we needed to get. And you don't get that opening boost that you do when you open a place.
What was it like coming to the realization that wasn't going to work?
It was pretty sad, but it was also really inevitable. It was just so far away from doing what it needed to do that it was not really it wasn't like it was almost working and we thought we could just tweak it a little bit. It was like, this is not going to get anywhere near where we need it to be.
Did you learn anything from that?
Yeah, we probably learned, I guess the biggest thing we learned was just that's okay. It's okay to fail. And I think, COVID in some ways has been great for that, right? There's a lot of businesses who have just gone, sometimes it's too hard and you've just got to turn it off.
How do you do that?
You take the L, you just accept it and move on, I guess. You can't take it too personally, or you'll just wreck yourself in the process.
Is there part of you that, because you've been successful over the last 10 years, you have this established brand, you're an institution, all that stuff, is there part of you that maybe becomes more reluctant to take risks that you may have taken earlier in your business journey, because now you have this reputation, you have a brand, you almost have something to lose, whereas when you're starting out, you have nothing to lose? Yeah,
totally. And I mean, I've got a family now, I've got a mortgage, and when we started Six Umbrella, I had none of those things. So the risk at the time was so low. I remember Mike, my business partner, I was freaking out about, our first business that we started. I was like, what if it all goes wrong? And he was like, we just go bankrupt. I was like, it's fine. You don't have kids, you just go get a job somewhere. And it was like, yeah, okay. But now that's heaps harder, right? Like, we've got business partners, we've got families, we've got houses, we've got a lot of things, but the kind of essence of our business is creativity and experimentality. So there's a lot of support from within the company, and my wife's really supportive of this as well. Of hey, if it's a good idea, let's give it a go. And as long as we don't put everything on the line, I think we're still really keen to try different things.
So, what's your advice to someone who's thinking about starting a business?
I would definitely advise to think a bit longer term than we did. I think when we started out, it was very much like, can we create this product? Do we know it's good? Can we get a few people to buy it? And we knew that. We knew we could make something that's good. But in a lot of ways, making the thing is not the hardest part, right? Like, brewing beer is not that hard. Making bread is not that hard. Roasting coffee is not that hard. Making soda is not that hard. It's the how do you turn that into a sustainable, growing, long-term solution? So I think working some of those things out, like where are you going to be in 3-5 years? And is that what you want to do? I think probably too many people start a business because they like baking bread, but then they realize they are now a baker, and that's quite hard.
Yeah, because that involves all the other components of running a business.
Totally, yeah.
So what were the parts of running a business that you needed to upskill on?
I mean, all of them, really.
All of it.
I was lucky. Mike, my business partner, is commercially and financially minded, so he kind of handled all of that, which meant I got to kind of lean into more of the creative side of things. So, I mean, we knew nothing about marketing or sales or packaging design and all of that. So we definitely learned a lot over the last 10 years. And, what not to do, and also just trusting your gut and hoping that it works out. I think seeing bigger companies, big, massive companies, and meeting people from them who were in these really senior positions and realizing that, hey, they're just some person who worked it out as well was really cool for us.
What would you say to someone who's doubting their ability to bring their idea to life?
I think testing it. So making sure that it's actually, what you're making is actually really good, making sure that there's a need for it, and then just making sure you actually want to do the thing, right? Like whether or not it can be a good business is not necessarily the point, right? It's whether you want to do it. A lot of people are perfectly happy in their job, and it's fine and it's easy and they've got their hobbies, and that's great. But if you want to change that up and you want to do something that is your product, then you can probably work it out. You can probably do it. But just test it a little bit first.
Have you changed as a person during this 10 years as a result of your business experiences?
I think in lots of ways. I mean, I've learned a lot, and I've become a lot more accepting of uncertainty. And I've accepted my limitations and not tried to be everything to everyone. I think that's been a big learning.
That's difficult.
Totally.
Especially when you've got people relying on you.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's no other way to do it, right? Like you can't do everything perfectly.
Do you feel the pressure of other people's expectations, whether that be staff or clients?
Way less so now than I used to. I think in some ways COVID's been good for that. I had this big realization when the first lockdown happened that I was carrying all this expectation and all this weight of needing to grow and needing to do this and do that. And then I had this big realization that if we collapse now, it's not my fault. It's COVID's fault. And in some ways that was really relieving. It was a huge weight off my shoulders. And then, we haven't collapsed through COVID, which has been lovely. But I've managed to kind of offset that expectation quite a lot as well. And part of that's having really supportive business partners, having a really supportive wife, and a team that we were able to be there for through all the lockdowns, and they've kind of repaid that with help.
You strike me as an incredibly level-headed person, especially for someone who is running such a large company and a large brand.
Yeah, well, I mean, I still think of us as a small business. We are still pretty a small team, and the level-headedness. I don't know if I certainly wasn't level-headed. I think I've really worked on that in the last few years to try and just have an acceptance of where things are at, do my best at what I can do, and work through it from there.
How do you keep your creativity alive when you've also got to deal with spreadsheets and forecasts and all that type of stuff?
Well, I quite like spreadsheets and forecasts, so that's been a learning. So that's not too bad. But the creativity part, I try and give myself space to have time for that, and whether that's listening to music after work or going to art shows or whatever it is that having that kind of inspiration for and the time to be creative is, I think, critical for what we do and have done. And even just having the time to think about things rather than just looking through emails all day and spreadsheets all day. So it's just making time in the day for that and realizing that that's essential. Are
you still the person who comes up with the flavours?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, we have our production manager, Jack, comes up with some. So we just did a peach, honey and manuka leaf, which was his recipe, which was really cool. So yeah, sometimes the production staff have come up with things. Sometimes our marketing managers have come up with things, but by and large, I do a lot of it. Yep.
You're still on the tools?
Not nearly as much as I used to be. Yeah, I do still have the occasional dispatch day when people are off or are off on childcare or sick, but definitely not in the kitchen as much as I was.
Where would you like to be in 5 years or another 10 years?
Yeah, 10 years is such a horizon, right? It's so long. I think I'm really happy with where the business is at now. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to keep growing, to keep building the team, to bring in expertise. And, that was one of our goals early on, was to get to a point where we could hire professionals, people who were really good at what they did, had some experience, had come from other companies who could bring their own knowledge. So I absolutely want to keep doing that. So I'd like the idea in 5 years, maybe 10 years, to be 3 times the staff, 4 times the staff, with a lot of experts helping to kind of build the brand.
How will you get there?
Just more of what we're doing. I think there's we've learnt so much about what works for us and what doesn't work for us, and there's just so much more to do, right? Like, there's so much more to do in New Zealand. There's so much more to do overseas. There's more flavours. There's more product lines. There's new product development. We're 10 years in and we haven't run out of ideas, so we're keeping them going.
Awesome. Hey, it's been great to hear more about your story, Joe. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Imagine This is brought to you by Wellington NZ. Check out more episodes right here or wherever good podcasts are found. See you next time.